I got everything where I want it, so let's just start this video. I just wanted to make a quick video about Fujifilm and why I shoot Fujifilm, and it's maybe not what you think. I'm not paid by Fujifilm. They do supply me with some gear to review. For instance, the XF10 that I just finished reviewing is sitting in a box right over there. I wasn't a big fan of that camera for one particular reason. The autofocus system was very underwhelming. That being said, there is a very high probability that that issue won't exist for long, and that is one of the reasons that keeps me with Fujifilm for my personal cameras that I shoot with. This video is being shot on my X-T20. I've got my trusty old XA1 back here. I've got the reasonably new X-T100, which I love. I love this camera. And I've got the original X100 with a whole bunch of accessories and stuff on it. This is one of my favorite cameras I've ever used in my entire life, and that includes the newer versions of this camera. So I want to start with this camera. When this camera came out, it was pretty unique in its time, and it's about 8 years ago now, 7 or 8 years ago. APS-C size sensor in a not DSLR body, which was pretty much unheard of at the time. It's got the optical viewfinder that's also an EVF that slides up in the way. There was a lot of bugs with this camera when it came out. The autofocus system was very, very slow. The startup times were really long. There was a lot of quirks with this camera, but if you were patient and you understood its limitations, you could create some really beautiful images with this camera. But this is kind of where Fujifilm's firmware philosophy started, and I believe they call it Kaizen, and it is... You know what, let me look up the definition of Kaizen. I don't want to get this wrong and offend an entire company and or country, so hold on. Okay, so the official dictionary definition of Kaizen is a Japanese business philosophy of continuous improvement of working practices, personal efficiency. Fujifilm uses the word Kaizen to signify their continuous support of their products through firmware updates. Now let me just ditch this phone here so we can talk about that. Fujifilm engineers, when they got some feedback from this camera, they said, okay, I think we can do something about that. And this was the first camera that got like a major firmware update that improved a lot of the things that people had issues with, like startup time, autofocus performance, write speed, just a bunch of stuff. The menu layout changed a little bit as well, and it was free. It was a free firmware upgrade to anybody that owned this camera. Other companies do firmware upgrades or firmware updates to fix bugs and to deal with issues with the camera, whereas Fujifilm will actually improve their cameras through firmware updates. When newer models came out, a lot of times the older model would get a lot of the features from that newer model. I think the best example of this is the XE2 and the XE2S. When the XE2S came out, there was a free firmware upgrade to give the XE2 all the features of the new XE2S that made it a different camera, made it cost more money, but they gave it to everybody that had an XE2 for free to give them all those features. The reason I'm doing this video is I watched a comparison of the Fujifilm X-T2 versus a Sony a6500. It was from a YouTuber named Dunna. His channel is Dunna Did It. I'll link it below, or I'll put it in the end screen or something like that. Canadian YouTuber, talks about cameras and filmmaking and that kind of stuff. Good follow if you're into this sort of thing. I think you'll probably really enjoy it. And he was testing out the Fujifilm X-T2. He's a Sony shooter. He talks about his a6500 a lot. He loves that camera. And one of the things he said was, I'm just paraphrasing here, I don't remember exactly how he put it, but a lot of the stuff he read about the X-T2, when he got the camera, those issues or the things people wished that camera did, it did, because the camera that he got had updated firmware to address issues that people had with their cameras. And not just bugs, but like actual performance improvements, like being able to record log files internally. That was a firmware upgrade that people said, man, I wish I could record log files internally. They did it. The X Pro 2, when the X Pro 2 was launched, it didn't record 4K video. And months later, after the XT2 came out and it was able to record 4K video, they were able to do a firmware update and include 4K video into the X Pro 2. I don't know any other camera company that does that sort of product support where they will actually upgrade their cameras for free. It's really, really cool. They're continuously updating firmware for their lenses, for their older bodies to work with newer lenses that they release. Circling back to the actual reason why I wanted to make this video, that XF10 and its autofocus system, like I said, there's an incredibly good chance that that will be corrected in a firmware update. And I hope that it is, because with good autofocus, that is a hell of a good camera for the money and for the size, and to have that APS-C sensor, that beautiful lens, the dynamic range of that sensor is amazing, the colors are great, it's everything you'd expect from a Fujifilm X series camera, but they gotta fix that autofocus, and I have faith that they will, so fingers crossed. That's just my little story about Fujifilm's Kaizen system and how it's given me a lot of faith to stay with Fujifilm even when I test a product that I'm not a huge fan of. I know that the system is good, and any issues that arise like that are definitely going to be addressed, hopefully going to be addressed, should be addressed. We'll see what happens, but in the past, I know that those kind of problems have never really stuck around for longer than a couple of months until the firmware update comes out. I'm gonna make another video wearing the exact same thing, so if they come out one after the other, you know, you're just gonna have to deal with it, because I've got something right over there that I'm about to make a video on, and it's really small and out of focus, so you probably can't see it, but stay tuned. Just gonna keep the ball rolling here. We're on a bit of a roll on this channel, and I'm loving it. I'm loving all the interaction with you guys, except for people that leave a-hole comments. I don't like any of you, and I don't care if you know it. That's it. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out Dennis' channel if you're into photography and cameras and videography and all that kind of stuff. Really good follow, good channel. Really good on Instagram as well. And that's it. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.